All right, so we saw one piece of useful information is the location of our peak. Another really useful piece of information is the number of peaks. And so the number of peak will each respond to a different hydrogen, right? Each peak or each signal will correspond to a unique proton, right? And so if we have a big molecule, say it has 10 protons, we might not necessarily see 10 signals. Some of these protons or some of these hydrogens may be chemically equivalent. And so what chemically equivalent technically means is that they're related through rotation or a mirror plane. There is some sort of symmetry within the molecule that causes the hydrogens to be in the same environment and are thus chemically equivalent. So let's take a look at two examples. One example we have here is 1-chloropropane. And then another example we have is 2-chloropropane. Right, so let's go ahead and just draw both of these molecules. And then we can add in the protons, right? If we think about the protons on this compound right here, we have two attached to the same carbon that are on the same chlorine, right? And those two are going to be the same because they're in the same chemical environment. Then we have another two. These two are different than the first two because now they're not attached to a carbon directly attached to a chlorine. And then finally, we have another three, which will be different than all the other ones because now they're even further away from the chlorine. And so what we would expect is 1, 2, 3 different peaks. And we would expect the first one to be all the way over to the left, second one somewhere in the middle, and then the third one all the way to the right. So something like that. And then when we take a look at 2-chloropropane, one thing that we can notice is that we have a plane of symmetry right here, or a rotation of axis that we can be symmetrical about. And so we have this hydrogen, which is different than all the other hydrogens because it's attached to the carbon right on the chlorine. And then we have these hydrogens over here, and these things are going to be the exact same as these other hydrogens. And so in this case, we would only expect to see two peaks, right? One all the way kind of towards the left, which will correspond to the one next to the chlorine, and then one further to the right. And if we take a look at their NMR spectra, that's exactly what we see here, right? This peak corresponds to those hydrogens. There's this peak right here, and then this peak right here, right? And then same thing for over here. We only have two peaks. We have this peak over here, and then we have this peak right over here. And so you can see symmetry is a powerful tool to solve these types of problems. And honestly, with the really simple ones, you can use symmetry to solve almost 90% of our problems. So you really want to have a good grasp on symmetry. Let's just run through some couple other examples. So here we have cyclohexane. If we think about it, this compound has all kinds of symmetry. And so what you'll actually see is just one peak here, assuming that you're at room temperature. What if we put a methyl on it? Try to pause the video and figure out how many peaks would show up now. Well, remember we have a plane of symmetry here. And so the hydrogens on this methyl would be different than any other hydrogen. The hydrogens on this methyl would be different than anybody else. These two hydrogens would be different and they'd be equivalent to the hydrogens on the left side. These two hydrogens would be different and they'd be equivalent to the hydrogens on the left side. And then finally, we'd have these two hydrogens down here. So if you count that, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 peaks that we would expect to see on our proton NMR spectra. What about if we had a double bond, a cyclohexene instead? Well, think about the symmetry here. There's a symmetry operation over here. And so this hydrogen and this hydrogen are the same. These two hydrogens are the same as these two hydrogens. And then these two hydrogens are the same as these two hydrogens. And so if you count the peaks there, here we'd expect to see 3 separate peaks. Continuing with our theme of 6 carbons, what if we had just hexane? Again, we have a plane of symmetry going through right here. And so these two hydrogens would be the same as these two hydrogens. These two hydrogens would be the same as these two hydrogens. And then these hydrogens would be the same as those. And so if you count it up, that's 3 peaks as well. So 3 peaks, again, is what we're expecting. One common functional group that you'll notice a lot is benzene. So this is C6H6, right? And if you think about this, this has a lot of symmetry. All the hydrogens are going to be the same, and there's only 1 peak here. So be able to look at a compound and use symmetry to predict how many peaks there are. Next up, we'll take a look at some more complicated scenarios of this.